Picture this. It's a Friday night in Las Vegas. The temperature outside is still hovering above 90 degrees, even at 9 o'clock. But inside the arena, it's electric. Ina different, way entirely. 17,000 people are on their feet. Not just politely standing, actually in their feet. Screaming, phones raised, some of them crying. The stage production is the kind you'd associate with a Super Bowl halftime show. There are pyrotechnics, aerial silks, a live band, and 48 dancers moving in perfect synchrony. And at the center of it all, a single artist. No backup act, no co-headliner. Just her, commanding an audience that has traveled from 34 countries to be in that room. When the music drops for the final sequence, the sound is almost indescribable. The bash hits your chest before you hear it. The lights go a single beam. And Lisa walks to the edge of the stage, looks out at the sea of faces, and just stops. For 3 full seconds, she doesn't move. She doesn't speak. And then she smiles. That moment, 3 seconds of silence inside a sold-out Vegas arena, is what this story is actually about. Because what happened before that smile, and what's been unfolding since, almost nobody in the music industry saw coming. Here's what you need to understand before we go any further. Las Vegas residencies are not just concerts. They are certifications. They are the music industry's way of saying, this artist has transcended trend. They have become permanent. The list of names who have held court in Las Vegas, Celine Dion, Elton John, Britney Spears, Adele, reads less like a booking roster and more like a hall of fame. Getting a Vegas residency doesn't just mean you repopular. It means you've crossed a threshold that most artists spend their entire careers trying to reach. And now, for the first time in the history of Las Vegas entertainment, a K-pop soloist is on that list. Boothers, I want you to hold on to as we go through this story. Question 1. How did a Thai-born K-pop idol become the artist who cracked the most exclusive entertainment market in the Western world? Question 2. What does the Las Vegas establishment, notoriously protective, notoriously slow-moving, actually think about what just happened? Question 3. Something occurred during this residency that reshaped the conversation around K-pop and Western pop in real time. What was it? And why is almost no one in mainstream media talking about it directly? And question 4. When the dust settles, will Lisa's Las Vegas run be a footnote in pop history? Or the moment that permanently changed the architecture of the music industry? By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why the answer to that last question is more complicated and more fascinating than anything overread in a headline. Let's start from the beginning. 1. The road to Las Vegas. Lalisa Manoban was 14 years old when she left Bangkok to audition for YG Entertainment in Seoul. She didn't speak Korean. She barely spoke English. What she had was something harder to quantify, a physical precision, a stage presence, and a hunger that YG's talent scouts reportedly recognized within minutes of watching her perform. She trained for 5 years before debuting. 5 years. Inside one of the most demanding entertainment systems in the world, where trainees are evaluated on a monthly basis and cuts are made without sentiment. During those years, Lisa reportedly finished first in her trainee evaluations, so consistently that she became something of a benchmark for the other trainees. She wasn't just surviving the system, she was rewriting its standards. When BLACKPINK debuted in August 2016, Lisa was immediately identified as the group's main dancer. But calling her the main dancer undersells it. Lisa brought a category of movement to K-pop that hadn't been widely seen at that level. Hip-hop, street dance, whacking, popping, layered over classical idol training. She wasn't just executing choreography. She was interpreting it. There's a difference, and audiences felt it instantly. By the mid-2020s, BLACKPINK had become arguably the most commercially successful girl group in the world. Stadium tours, record-breaking YouTube numbers, fashion partnerships that crossed from music into luxury culture. But there's where the story takes its first sharp turn. When Lisa released her solo debut, Lalisa, in September 2021, something unexpected happened. Not unexpected in terms of quality. Fans knew what they were getting. Unexpected in terms of scale. The music video shattered YouTube viewing records in its first 24 hours for a K-pop solo artist. The title track charted in countries where K-pop had barely registered before. And a B-side track called Money, which wasn't even the lead single, took on a life of its own. Money became a social media phenomenon. It showed up in fitness videos, in fashion content, in club playlists, in film trailers. It became the kind of song that people who had never once searched for K-pop were hearing and not quite knowing where it came from. That frictionless crossover, the way the sound traveled across audience boundaries without losing its identity, was a signal. A very specific signal to very specific people in the industry. Industry analysts started watching differently after that. Because what Money demonstrated wasn't just that Lisa could write a hit. It demonstrated that her audience was not bounded by fandom. She wasn't just reaching the K-pop community. She was reaching people who didn't know they were K-pop fans yet. That distinction is everything in the Las Vegas equation. There were doubters, of course. There are always doubters. When reports began circulating that Lisa was in conversations about a Las Vegas residency, the reactions in certain corners of the entertainment industry were skeptical, to put it charitably. The concern wasn't about her talent. Most people who understood the live performance landscape knew she could command a stage. The concern was about market fit. Las Vegas residency audiences, the argument went, skew older, more mainstream, less digitally native. And K-pop, for all its global dominance online, had never tested itself in this particular arena. The subtext of the skepticism was something the industry doesn't always say out loud but always means, this market belongs to us, and we're not sure you belong to it. What happened next proved that the doubters were working with an outdated map. 2. Inside the residency. The venue was Dolby Live at Park MGM, a 17,000 capacity arena on the south end of the Strip that has hosted residencies by Bruno Mars, Silk Sonic, and most recently, a handful of the biggest names in contemporary pop. It is, in the language of Las Vegas entertainment, a premier room. Not a boutique room you book when you're building an audience. A destination room you book when you've already built one. The production design was reported to be among the most technically ambitious the venue had staged. Sources close to the production described a set that incorporated real-time video mapping across the full stage structure, a 20-meter lid de centerpiece, custom aerial rigging, and a 48-member live dancer ensemble that rehearsed for 10 weeks in advance. Think about what that means for a second. 10 weeks of rehearsal for a production team that size is not normal. It is the kind of preparation you do when you know the margin for error is zero, because the stakes are too high and the eyes are too many. Ticket demand, by most accounts, was extraordinary. The initial run of dates reportedly sold through within hours of going on sale, prompting additional performances to be added to the calendar. The fan base mobilized globally. Travel packages from South Korea, Japan, Thailand, Brazil, and the United Kingdom sold out through third-party vendors. Hotels in the surrounding blocks reportedly high occupancy levels more commonly associated with major sporting events. Celebrity attendance was significant and, in certain cases, notable for what it signaled. Industry figures who don't typically make a point of being seen at K-pop events showed up. Producers, label executives, A&R directors. One way to read that is simple curiosity. Another way to read it, and arguably the more accurate reading, is that these were people doing research. People trying to understand something that their existing frameworks weren't fully explaining. The performances themselves were described by multiple critics and attendees as something closer to theatrical event than concert. Reviews noted the pacing, the way the show moved between energy states with deliberate control, building tension and releasing it across a 2-hour runtime. One reviewer compared it, favorably, to the best residency performances they'd seen from Adele at the Coliseum. That comparison is not made casually. Let's stop for a second to understand why the Las Vegas residency format matters historically. When Celine Dion launched A New Day at Caesars Palace in 2003, the entertainment world treated it as something of a gamble. She was successful, certainly, but a sustained run in Vegas, rather than a world tour, was seen as unconventional for a touring-level artist. It became, instead, one of the most celebrated and financially successful residencies in entertainment history. It redefined what a residency could mean for a contemporary artist. When Britney Spears launched Piece of Me at Planet Hollywood in 2013, it represented something different, a rehabilitation narrative, a proof of relevance, and, in terms of raw economics, a machine that generated hundreds of millions in revenue without a single tour bus. When Adele launched her Weekends with Adele residency, she quite literally rebuilt the template. The production value, the intimacy within the scale, the way she used the format to deliver something qualitatively different from a tour. Each of these residencies didn't just succeed. They shifted what the format meant. And that is the lineage that Lisa has now stepped into. Boothers where it gets really interesting, because something happened, specifically on the third night of the residency, that became the most talked about moment of the entire run. And it had almost nothing to do with the performance itself. During a between-song moment, Lisa spoke directly to the audience. Not a prepared speech, visibly unscripted, delivered in English, Korean, and Thai within the space of about 90 seconds. She talked about what the room meant to her. She talked about the years of training. And she said something that landed differently, depending on who was listening. She said, roughly, that she had spent a long time being asked to choose between her culture and her career, between what she came from and where she wanted to go. And that she had decided the answer was that she didn't have to choose. That whole point was that she didn't have to. Clips of that moment circulated across social media for days. Not because it was shocking, because it was specific, because it named something that a lot of people, not just K-pop fans, not just Asian artists, not just first-generation immigrants, recognize from their own experience. That is not the kind of moment you can manufacture. That is the kind of moment that happens when an artist has been honest about where they've come from, long enough that their audience trusts them when they finally say it plainly. And that is the thread we need to pull on to answer the question this whole video has been building toward. 3. The bigger picture. For the last decade, the conversation around K-pop's global expansion has been framed in a particular way. K-pop breaks through into Western markets. K-pop artists collaborate with Western artists. K-pop fandoms drive streaming numbers that Western labels can't ignore. The metaphor used, almost universally, is infiltration, as if K-pop is a foreign element entering a host body. That framing is not entirely wrong, but it has always carried within it an assumption that the Western market is the destination, and K-pop is the traveler trying to earn entry. Lisa's Las Vegas residency challenges that assumption at its root. Here's what's different about what happened here. Lisa did not adapt herself to the Las Vegas market. The Las Vegas market, the venue, the infrastructure, the booking system, the audience demographic, adapted to accommodate her. Dates were added because her audience demanded them. Production was scaled because her team required it. The marquee went up because the economics made it undeniable. That's not an artist breaking into a market. That's a market responding to an artist. And the implications of that distinction are significant for K-pop as an industry and for the broader architecture of global pop music. For years, the working theory inside major Western labels was that K-pop was a youth-skewing internet phenomenon that would plateau once the novelty factor diminished. The kids who streamed it would grow up and move on. The fandoms were passionate, but finite. This was the theory. The problem with that theory is that it has been wrong, repeatedly, for a decade. And Lisa's Las Vegas residency is the most recent and most visible piece of evidence against it. Because the audience that filled Dolby Live for those shows was not simply a fandom. It was a market. With money. With loyalty. With enough organizational capacity to coordinate international travel to a city in the Nevada desert for a concert experience. That is not the behavior of a trend. That is the behavior of a culture. Now, the question the title of this video asks is, will it change K-pop forever? Let's be precise about what that question actually means. Because change K-pop could mean a lot of things. It could mean that other K-pop artists will now pursue Las Vegas residencies. It could mean that the Western entertainment establishment will change how it classifies and values K-pop. It could mean that the internal economics of the K-pop industry, the way labels plan careers, the way artists are developed, will shift in response to new evidence about what's possible. The honest answer, the one that holds up under scrutiny, is yes, but not in the way you might expect. It won't change K-pop because other artists will immediately replicate the Las Vegas formula. Las Vegas residencies are not scalable by definition. They require a very specific combination of audience size, geographic mobility, genre flexibility, and production infrastructure. Not every K-pop artist can or should try to replicate what Lisa did. What it will change is something more structural. It will change the ceiling. For the next generation of K-pop artists and the labels that develop them, the Las Vegas residency is now a data point. A proof of concept. A thing that happened, which means a thing that can happen again. And when the ceiling moves, everything below it shifts upward. The scale of ambition. The scope of international bookings. The conversations that happen in A&R meetings about what trajectory is possible for a solo artist from Korea or Japan or Thailand. That shift, quiet, incremental, structural, is arguably more powerful than any single chart position or streaming record. There's one more dimension here that deserves naming directly. Lisa is Thai, not Korean. And for all of Kpop's global expansion, the conversation about the genre's identity has often centered on its Korean origins. The language, the aesthetics, the cultural context. What Lisa represents, at least in part, is a different kind of question. What happens when the K-pop training system produces an artist from another country, another culture, another linguistic tradition, and that artist goes on to become one of the defining figures of the genre? The answer, in this case, is that she ends up on a Las Vegas marquee. And what that says to artists in Southeast Asia, to entertainment industries in Thailand, to the next teenager in Bangkok who is watching these videos, and wondering whether this world has room for them, is something that no streaming number, no chart position, no industry report can fully quantify. There is one final tension worth naming before we close. Some critics, and they are worth taking seriously, have argued that the Las Vegas Residency represents a kind of assimilation rather than a genuine cultural expansion. That in order for Kpop to succeed in the Western market, it must be filtered through Western entertainment infrastructure, the Vegas venue, the Western production design, the English language interviews and social media presence. That critique has real weight, and the counter-argument isn't that it's wrong. It's that it may be applying the wrong frame, because Lisa has never, at any point in her career, presented herself as something other than what she is. She has spoken Thai in interviews, performed in Korean, incorporated references from her Bangkok upbringing into her art. The Las Vegas audience wasn't responding to a sanitized, Western-facing version of Lisa. They were responding to the full version, and that full version was the one that sold out 17,000 seats. Whether that represents a genuine cultural collision, or a commercially successful compromise, or something that doesn't yet have a clean name, that is a question the industry will be debating for years. And that debate itself is proof that something real has changed. Let's close the loops we opened at the start of this video. You asked how a Thai-born K-pop idol cracked the most exclusive entertainment market in the Western world. The answer is that she didn't crack it so mukas makit, irrelevant to resist her. The audience, the economics, and the cultural moment all converged at the same time, and Las Vegas, which is, above everything else, a business, followed the money and the meaning simultaneously. You asked what the Las Vegas establishment actually thinks. The honest answer, a complex mixture of respect, recalibration, and accelerating interest. The executives who attended those shows did not leave unchanged. The conversations that followed, about K-pop, about global pop, about what a mainstream audience actually looks like in 2025, are different conversations than the ones that were happening before. You asked about the thing that happened on night 3. Now you know. A 90-second unscripted moment, delivered in 3 languages, that named something most artists are afraid to say clearly, and which turned out to resonate far beyond any single demographic. And you asked whether this will change K-pop forever. The answer is yes. But not with fireworks, not with a single industry-shaking announcement. It will change K-pop the way all real change happens, slowly, then suddenly. In the decisions made by young artists who watched this happen and recalibrated their sense of what's possible. In the conversations between label executives who now have a new data point to work from. In the expectations of a generation of fans who watched their artists stand on a Las Vegas stage and refuse, quietly but absolutely, to be treated as an exception. Here is what he thinks the real story of Lisa's Las Vegas residency is. It's not about Las Vegas. It's not even about K-pop. It is about what happens when the architecture of an industry, built over decades, maintained by consensus, defended by gatekeepers, meets an artist whose audience simply doesn't recognize the walls. The walls don't fall dramatically. They just become, gradually, irreversibly, less relevant. 3 seconds of silence. 17,000 people holding their breath. And then a smile that said, I knew this was possible all along. If this kind of story interests you, the way individual artists reshape entire industries, often without anyone noticing until it's already happened, there's another story that connects directly to this one. But that's for next time.